Well, I didn't push a button, so thank y'all. With all of that being said, it has been a while since I've been up here and had the chance to speak. I've had a few months off because of one little newborn baby named Riley Hope Bruce, who is the most precious thing in the world. I love her so much. She's so cute. But I feel like over the past 2 months that I haven't been having the opportunity to stand up here on a semi-regular basis and preach to y'all, that I've grown up a lot in the last 2 months. I'm just kidding. Look at my first slide. I've still got that childlike enthusiasm. And that's part of what I actually want to talk about when it comes to our influence. We each have something in our lives. We each have some kind of personality about our lives that is like a slogan for our life. That it's almost like a billboard. You saw the first slide, the exit now for fill in the blank, whatever you want. It's like a billboard directing people to something. We all have this slogan or this billboard that is over our lives, and we may not even realize it sometimes, but we have multiple of these things, these personality traits, or the things that we care about, the things that are important to us, that is obvious to people in our lives that, hey, that is important to them. That's what makes that individual unique. For me, I have a very childlike personality. I own that. That's okay. I put Eat More Chicken up on the screen. But I want to play a little game here about these slogans, because some of them are very well known. We can look at some of these slogans and know, yeah, that belongs to Chick-fil-A. And Chick-fil-A does a fantastic job of marketing. They talk about chicken in their slogan, and yet it makes you want a milkshake. They do a fantastic job with their slogan, but that's not all. There's another one, just like you like it. Y'all remember what that slogan belongs to? Come on, Texans, y'all should know this one. Whataburger. And Whataburger, with the slogan, just like you like it, makes you want a Whataburger. And you hear just like you like it, and you think about Whataburger. Another one, have it your way. The thing that really sticks with me about this one is that I never eat Burger King, and yet I still think of Burger King when I see have it your way. I haven't had Burger King in who knows how long, but their slogan sticks with you. It's what they're known for. And then finally, McDonald's, I'm loving it. Everybody knows this one. It's things that you see, just one simple phrase, and you think of what it belongs to. But it's not only that. Billboards work the same way that slogans work. And the most impressive billboards that I've ever seen belong to a gas station that can be hundreds of miles away, and yet they still will let you know where Buc-ee's is. You can be in a completely other state. You can be hours away. You can have another rest stop planned before you get to Buc-ee's, and then another couple hours of the drive, but Buc-ee's will let you know, hey, don't forget, we're 262 miles away from where you are right now. And they're well known for so many things. Their brisket, their fudge, their incredibly clean bathrooms. But Buc-ee's has these billboards that you will not miss it, and you know what comes to mind when you see these sorts of things. Transitioning to spiritual, though. Slogans and billboards, they work to deliver a message, and they work very effectively. We deliver messages in our lives and in different ways to different people every single day. Every single day when somebody looks at you, when somebody talks with you, even if somebody just knows your life and they can make eye contact with you, you are delivering a message to that person. We have an influence very similar to the way that these slogans and that these billboards have an influence over people. What does yours say? That's the important question of this evening. What does your billboard say? What does your slogan say? It can say all sorts of different things. Really, once you start to open up the box, it's endless. It can be anything about your career. It can be anything about the world of entertainment. You can look to sports, you can look to even money and finances, just things that you might find yourself being obsessed with. There are so many different things that you can wear as a slogan, that you can put on your billboard. But tonight I want to ask us 3 questions. What does our billboard say to, first of all, the lost? People are lost all around us. There are people in our world that we come into contact with every single day, that they look at us, that we speak with them, that we make eye contact with them, and we're delivering a message to them. What is that message that we're delivering? What is our influence to the lost world? You may not even realize it sometimes, but you are delivering an influence. And some of the ways that we go about doing that is like what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5. And I can't really see what's written in the yellow on the screen back there, so I hope the lighting is better up here. But that first one says Matthew chapter 5. If you'll turn there with me. Jesus talks about our influence through our actions, even if we don't realize that we are influencing people via our actions. In Matthew chapter 5, we will start reading in verse 14. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. And it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. This is your influence over people. When you let your light shine, when you do good works, not so that people can see. I feel like I've talked plenty of lessons about faith versus works, that we work because of our faith. We don't work to earn any kind of faith. But when we do work, people see it. People outside the church see it. This is our influence upon the lost. People who are not in Christ, people who do not know Christ the way that we know Christ, they will see our works and they'll attribute it to the goodness of God. They will glorify our Father who is in heaven. Also in Acts chapter 16, that's where we're going. Acts chapter 16, if you'll flip over there with me. We see the influence that Paul and Silas have on an individual here. We find Paul and Silas in prison. They're in prison in Philippi, and they're in stocks. The Philippian jail that they are in is not a comfy place. It's not a place where they get 3 square meals a day or they have a bed to sleep on even. They are in an uncomfortable place from what we can see historically. And yet, what do we find in verse 25 of Acts chapter 16? Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Think about the influence that Paul and Silas are having at this moment. First of all, the location they find themselves in can be very influential, but even more so what they're doing. They're in prison, and yet they're still praying, they're singing hymns to God. But I want to look at the influence that they have upon the jailer. Because what happens is this earthquake comes, and I'll just go ahead and read it. In verse 26, and suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken. And immediately all the doors were open, and everyone's bonds were unfastened. So you think, okay, with Paul and Silas's influence, surely they're going to tell all the prisoners, hey, when we get out, come find us so we can tell you about Jesus, right? Like, they're going to try to use this influence that they've gained by singing and praying? No. In verse 27, when the jailer woke and saw that the prison doors were open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself. Because if this jailer has let any prisoners go, he's going to lose his life from his commanding officer anyways. What would happen here is if the guard let a prisoner escape on his watch, he's going to die. And he knows that, and he doesn't want to die at the hand of somebody else, so he's going to take his own life. Paul and Silas also know that. And so they don't let any of the prisoners run away. Nobody leaves. Nobody goes anywhere. Verse 28, but Paul cried with a loud voice, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." And the jailer called for lights and rushed in, and trembling with fear, he fell down before Paul and Silas. When we continue reading, we see that Paul and Silas preach the gospel to this jailer, to his whole family, that they believe the message, that they obey the gospel, and that they're baptized into Christ. Now think about the influence. Think about the influence that Paul and Silas have upon this man. Think about the influence that Paul and Silas have upon the other prisoners that are there to say, don't go anywhere. That jailer is going to lose his life if we run away. But they use their influence to share the gospel. Remember what I said at the very beginning? If you don't remember anything else from this message, hear one thing. Your influence needs to be about to look at what Jesus Christ has done in my life. Paul and Silas use their influence to talk about Jesus. Finally, I want to look at John chapter 4. Jesus uses his influence with the woman at the well. In John chapter 4, you can turn there if you'd like. I'll talk through it real quick because I have a lot more examples to go through. But in John chapter 4, Jesus sends his disciples on into town to go get food, and he stops by at the well, and the Samaritan woman comes up to draw water. And Jesus, being a Jewish male, should not be talking to this woman coming to draw water who is a female Samaritan. And yet he does. He sparks up a conversation with her. And he goes on to talking about living water and then proves himself to be the Messiah, the Christ. And this woman goes back and tells her entire village that she has just met Jesus Christ. What I want to point out about the influence here is it's a matter of what Jesus cared about. He's using just a regular conversation, just a simple conversation about water, and turns it spiritual because that's what he's focused on. That's what he's here for. Can we think in the same way? Can we use our influence in the same way in that when we are just in the middle of simple conversations, we can turn it spiritual? We can turn people's minds towards Christ. You know, there are so many things in our life that we can be obsessed with. I talked with the teens this morning about this a little bit, partly because it was on my mind from tonight's lesson, but there are plenty of things that we can just let them consume us, that we can become all about. I put a few things on here, maybe a little bit small for you, but things like sports or beauty or money or hunting or fishing, the status that we may have or our career. These are all things that we can become completely just obsessed with. And that obsession is your God. It's modern day idolatry. Whatever it is that consumes your life, that's your little silver idol. We don't make physical idols like that anymore. I think we've learned enough from the Old Testament not to fall into those same kind of traps. But the things that we find ourselves being obsessed with, it becomes our object of worship. And here's my point, is that if we have an obsession in anything except for God himself, except for Jesus Christ, we're going to find ourselves very disappointed in this life. Because all of these things let us down. Sports will let us down. Beauty, money, even hunting and fishing. Fishing lets me down every time I go. If you are seeking after a career, you're going to be let down when somebody else takes the promotion from you. When you're passed up for that promotion, or when you're laid off, if your career is your obsession, you're going to be let down. But when God is your obsession, he never lets you down. And when God is your obsession, that's the influence that you will carry with you. That's the slogan you wear above your head. That's the billboard that you have for your life. That's what people see when they look at you in the eyes. So I ask the question again. What's your influence to the lost? What is it that people see when they see you? Through your actions, through your words, or just through a simple conversation? Which direction are you taking people? The other factor of influence I want to look at is our families. We all carry an influence in our families. For sake of time, Luke chapter 2 just talks about Jesus as a boy in the temple. We've got some other examples, again, that I want to look at. But if you turn to Luke chapter 2, you know the story where Jesus is with Joseph and Mary. They're in Jerusalem, and then as a family, they decide to get in the caravan and head on back home. But a few days passed, and where's Jesus? We thought he was with somebody else in the family. And so they turn back around and go back, and they find him in the temple. And Jesus replies, Don't you know where I would be? You see, everybody in the family has an influence. Kids and parents alike, I want everybody to hear this. If you vocalize your desires for Scripture, you are carrying out your influence. For young people, if you go and tell your parents, hey, I want to study the Bible more as a family, that's influential to your parents. Regardless of age, if you tell your parents, hey, this is my desire, I want to learn more, I want to grow in this way, your parents aren't going to look at you and say, no, that does not matter. They're going to say, wow, my kid is influencing me in a good way. Parents alike, you have influence over your kids. Even though some of the teenagers may not seem like they listen to you, they do. You have an influence over your kids. Use it for godliness. Let the billboard of your life, the slogan you have above your head, be one that says, we are all about God. We are all about Christ. We are all about His book. And our family is going to reflect that. I also want to emphasize when we're talking about our influence in our families that as a church family, we shouldn't neglect the power of a VBS or events like that or a youth group in how we can reach out to the lost. We talked about our influence to the lost through our words, through our actions, through just even simple conversations. But when we have an opportunity to reach a young person in a family that is lost, we have to capitalize on that opportunity. I can't tell you how many times there are entire families that are brought to Christ because the child at 3 or 4 years old was invited to a vacation Bible school by another 3 or 4 year old. And then all of a sudden the parents start talking about their faith. We can't underestimate the power of influence within the family. Both parents and kids carry this a long way, but it doesn't stop just there. Aunts and uncles, grandparents, whatever your relationship may be to a physical family, we all carry this influence within the family. I do want to look at John chapter 1 real quick, as far as influence between family members go. John chapter 1, Jesus begins calling his disciples here. And we'll start reading in verse 40. One of the two who heard John speak and followed Jesus was Andrew. Let me back up to 35. This is going to be easier than me trying to explain it. We'll just read through verse 35 and following of John chapter 1. The next day, again, John was standing with the two disciples, and he looked at Jesus as he walked by and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." This is John the Baptist speaking about Jesus Christ. Verse 37, the two disciples heard him say this, and they followed Jesus. Jesus turned and saw them following and said to them, "What are you seeking?" And they said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come, and you will see." So they came and saw where he was staying, and they stayed with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. One of the two who heard John speak and followed Jesus was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which means Christ. He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas, which means Peter." The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." And Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." The point I wanted to show from that kind of long reading, but a good reading, is that one person can reach so many more people. Evangelism works as like tree branches branching off. Sometimes it can be very daunting as one individual to see that we have thousands of people that live in the city of Keller. How in the world am I going to reach thousands of people? You're not. I'm not. Chris is not. None of us can reach thousands of people. But you know what we can do? I can reach one, and that one can reach one, and then I'll reach another, and that one who reached another one can reach another one, and then that one can reach another one. And do you see how it branches off from there? That's what we see happening with Jesus and his followers. Jesus called Philip, and Philip called Nathanael. Jesus called Andrew, and Andrew called Peter. We can't underestimate the power that family members have, the influence that family members have over one another. The last thing I'll say about this before we move on a slide is that influence does not equal responsibility. I hope nobody hears that tonight. That influence does not equal responsibility to lead within the family. Men, it is our responsibility to step up and lead our families. Everybody has an influence in the family. But fathers, men of the families, men in the church, it is our responsibility to lead. Everyone can influence one another and encourage them in their responsibilities. Finally, I want to talk about our influence in the church. We all have, as I just said in the last point, we all have our roles and our responsibilities. And with that comes influence. This morning, Joshua presented an excellent lesson talking about the different talents that we've been blessed with and how we need to put those talents to use. He talked about Involvement Sunday, how that's a great opportunity to say, I have been blessed with this talent, I want to put this talent to use. He talked about the different responsibilities that we have within the church, the different roles that we may take on. And with all of that we have been blessed with, because they are blessings, they are gifts from the Father, with that comes influence. Both a positive and a negative influence, potentially. Because if we decide to turn our back on our responsibilities, to shirk the role that we've been given, that is negatively influencing our brothers and sisters around us. But if we say, here am I, send me, I'm going to step up to the plate, then that's positively influencing our brothers and sisters, positively encouraging them to do the same. When it comes to our influence in the church, when we fulfill our responsibilities, it will be positive and encouraging. When we neglect them, our influence is negative. But I also want to talk about individuals and our responsibilities in the church. There are a lot of different roles that we find within the church. And I'm not only talking to the people here, the elders, the deacons, the ministers here. We have people watching online. We have people who are not yet in a role of an elder, a deacon, or a minister, but are in training and are aspiring to do so. So I hope that everybody who has a potential to have this apply to them is listening with ears wide open. But with elders specifically, if you have been tasked with the responsibility to shepherd, even young men, you may see it as something that's far out. But if you have been tasked with the responsibility to shepherd, and you don't leave the 99 to go after the one, as we read in the parable of the lost sheep, how does that affect the influence of your flock? For Christians, if we decide to bury our talents, how does that affect the influence that we have over our brethren? For our deacons within the church, if you have been given a task that you decide may not suit you, and so you decide to just drop it and do nothing, how does that affect the influence that you have over your brethren? It doesn't affect the influence, but it affects how you influence. For teachers, both young and old, I have to speak a moment about the young teachers that we have. Chris and Clarice Longat have done a fantastic job recruiting our young people to step up and teach the elementary classes. There are so many of them that are growing in their teaching, but teachers of all ages, whether you're just learning to teach or whether you're a seasoned teacher, if you just decide to kind of mail it in and say, I know that Bible story, I know that lesson, I don't really need to prepare and study for that. How are you influencing those students? How are you influencing those that are listening to you? What I want to show through this, and what I hope everybody is listening to, again, whether it's somebody online that I may not even know who I'm talking to, or somebody that's going to fulfill one of these roles in the future, or somebody who's in a current role right now. If we've been given a responsibility, we have an influence that comes along with it. My only question is, what does your influence say? The last thing I'll say about this is actually Matthew chapter 25. I already had it up on the screen, but Matthew chapter 25, I want to look at the parable of the talents. Because no matter how many times I say it, I think Jesus' words are more powerful. I know Jesus' words are more powerful. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus tells the parable of the talents. And beginning in verse 14, "For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another he gave 2, to another he gave 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you delivered to me 5 talents? Here, I have made 5 more.'" You can almost hear the excitement of, I've done what you've asked. In verse 21, his master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." Good job. You were given a responsibility. You were given a role. In this specific parable, they were given a talent, which is a sum of money. But they were given something to do with it. And he did something with it. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master. In verse 22, "And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more." His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." It's the same as the first servant. He was given something. He was given a responsibility, and he said, "I'm up to the task. I will do what you ask, master." Verse 24, "He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not sow, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours.'" I didn't destroy it. I didn't turn my back on it. I didn't get rid of it altogether. I just didn't really do anything with it. I still have that same responsibility. I still have that same thing that you gave to me to do something with. I'm just giving it back to you. Verse 26, "But his master answered him, 'You wicked and slothful servant,'" which, if we look at the Greek, that's evil and lazy, is the servant that did nothing, which is pretty powerful, to be evil and lazy. The master said in the middle of verse 26, "You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." It gets really, really powerful when you read all the way to the end of that parable. But what Jesus is instructing here is that if he has given us something, we have absolutely no right to turn our back on it. If he has tasked us with a responsibility, if he has given us a role that comes from the abilities that he has given us, from the skills, from the talents, the physical talents that we have no right to turn our back on it. And whatever we choose to do, we carry with us an influence, both positively and negatively. But my question for y'all tonight is, what does your billboard say? What's the slogan of your life? What is your influence? It can be answered with so many different things. Even spiritually speaking, it can be answered with so many different things. I like to brag on my dad. He's here tonight, so I feel like I can brag on him. Even spiritually speaking, we may have different forms of slogans or billboards in our lives. My dad is in love with worship and everything surrounding worship and the lifting up of our voices in song to the creator of the universe. We all have something, even within the spiritual realm, of what we are passionate about. My question to you is your slogan about Jesus and anything that may contain that, or is it about something completely different in the world? Tonight you have the opportunity to make it right if it's not about Christ. Tonight you have the opportunity to start your slogan. If you have not even worn Christ as the Lord of your life, tonight it's time to put him on in baptism. If you at one time made that decision but have let that slip away, if you put the clothes that you were clothed with Christ in a drawer and tucked it far away, it's time to pull that back out so that when people see you, they know what you're about. You can make that right. You can ask for prayers, and you can correct your course. Whatever the need may be, I ask that you come forward as we stand and sing.